because we just couldn't wait to get this going. I hope this is as much fun by the end of it for you as it is for us. First question from me is when are we going to get to Mars?
Well, I think we'll get to, when will we get the first people to Mars? I think we have a decent shot of doing that in about, I'd say I call it 5 years, something like that. So Earth and Mars sync up every 26 months. That's when we're in it's roughly the same quadrant of the solar system, and where we can do interplanetary transfer. And so we had one about 6 months ago, so about a year and a half there'll be another one. So figure, I don't know, 5.5 years.
5.5 years. So what does it take from here to that point? Like, what are the milestones you think for us to get to, 5 years out, we are landing on Mars?
Well, we're going to make the Starship fly, get to go to orbit and back repeatedly. I mean, the essential elements are you need a fully reusable, you need a fully and rapidly reusable orbital rocket. This is the holy grail of rocketry. So no one has ever succeeded in creating a fully reusable rocket. And it can't just be fully reusable, it needs to be rapidly reusable, so it doesn't take several months of refurbishment between flights. It needs to be much like aircraft, where the cost of an air flight is the biggest component of that is fuel. You can't just be throwing rockets away every time.
Right.
And then you need to have orbital refilling, so where you can send the ship up to orbit, then send another ship up, dock with a transfer propellant, so that you can load up to being almost full with propellant, and then go to Mars. If you've got a large, fully rapidly reusable rocket with orbital refilling that uses high efficiency, low cost propellant, then you can go to Mars. And then one last thing is, on Mars, you need local propellant production. So you take CO2 out of the atmosphere, combine it with water ice, H2O, to create CH4, methane, and oxygen. And if you have those elements, life can become multiplanetary, and we can have a self-sustaining city on Mars, which I think is one of the most important things we could possibly do for ensuring the long-term existence of consciousness.
Ooh, yeah, I think that makes sense. Sorry,
of consciousness.
Yeah, Elon, you've spoken about this often, which is, expanding the scope of consciousness and how it is tied to multiplanetary life. Could you explain what that means for you and why that matters to you?
And we don't need all that, man. We just need the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Super Zord. We can go straight to Mars.
So originally, I had sort of kind of an existential crisis when I was a kid, trying to figure out what's the meaning of life, why are we here, what's the point of it all, is it all meaningless? I got quite depressed, actually, and sad about it. And then the thing that kind of broke me out of it was reading Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where he essentially pointed out that the universe is the answer, and really the hard part is figuring out what questions to ask about the answer that is the universe. Yeah, exactly. He was exactly trying to make fun of the fact that the answer is the easy part, but the questions are the hard part. So, in order for us to gain a better understanding of what questions to ask, or to understand what it's all about, we have to increase the scope and scale of consciousness, so that we're better able to figure out which questions to ask and answer them. So, at the same time, the broader in scope, larger in scale, then consciousness is more likely to be able to answer those questions and figure out what they are, why we're here, to answer the fundamental questions. And I think there's arguably a great filter that we face with, will we become a multi-planet species or not? We'd be surprised if out there in our galaxy and others that there are a whole bunch of dead one-planet civilizations that prospered for a while. They might have prospered for millions of years, but then gradually the civilization collapsed for reasons external or internal, and that was that. All civilizations go through an arc where they build technology complexity, but then they don't keep going up. Over time they decline, they fall. And this has happened obviously with, if you're a student of history, with many civilizations in the past. You can look at ancient Egypt. 5,000 years ago there was the Great Pyramid of Giza, but then the people living there forgot how to build pyramids after a while, and then they forgot how to read hieroglyphics. There's obviously, Gibbon's famous book about the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, and how they had advanced technology in terms of roads, aqueducts, plumbing, and so forth, and then they basically forgot about it. The ancient Sumerians, Babylonians, all these things, they've all gone through a similar arc, which suggests that most likely we will go through such an arc ourselves, and we'll be arguably less resilient to recovery because of globalization. So I think for the first time in the 4.5 trillion year history of Earth, it's been possible to extend life beyond Earth and make life multiplanetary. And this window of opportunity may be open for a long time. I hope it is, or it may be open for a short time. And I think it would be wise for us to assume that it's open for a short time. I'm an optimist, not a pessimist, but you have to say, like, there's some chance it's only open for a short time, and we should take advantage of this brief window of opening where we can transport life to make life multiplanetary, and humanity is essentially the agent of life in this process. And I think we almost have an obligation to ensure that the creatures of Earth continue, even if there is a calamity on Earth, which, as I said, could be man-made or it could be some natural calamity. As if you look at the fossil record, there are many mass extinctions.
Yeah, I think all of it makes sense, and I think you've talked about this before. I think one other question I have is, when we get there, we have to set up the whole society. We have to set up civilization there. How will the whole thing work in your mind? Everything from what does it mean to have internet connection in Mars, all the way to like governments and rules and laws and everything.
Yeah, I think all those things need to happen. Yeah. Just as they happen in the U.S. and happen in every country. And I would not presume to prescribe what should happen there. I think the important part is just that we get people there and we get the equipment necessary to establish a self-sustaining civilization, at least one self-sustaining city. And I think the key threshold of when we would pass the great filter, this particular great filter, is Mars sufficiently self-sustaining such that if the ships stop coming from Earth for any reason, it could be,
I think we just need to get
something massive or something banal. I mean, civilization on Earth can end with a bang or a whimper. But either way, if the ships stop coming from Mars, does Mars die out or not? And Mars only has to be missing one little ingredient, like the equivalent of vitamin C, and it will survive for a while, but it will eventually die out. So it's kind of getting a student on Mars to pass that critical threshold where it is self-sustaining. And are we able to do that before some calamity or a gradual decline in civilization occurs that prevents the ships from going there? That's the key threshold. I mean, in a more pithy way, is like, does the city on Mars become self-sustaining? Which comes first?
Like, I don't even feel we can get to Mars, but this guy's like, are we gonna get there before we mash up everything? What?
If you kind of let yourself dream out over the next few decades, like, what would you consider success? Like, let's say they get through the first 5 years, even the first 10 years. Like, what do you think is possible to build on Mars 10 years in, 20 years in, 30 years in after first arrival?
Well, I think Mars will start off being very, very tiny, just like a tiny little outpost. And by the way, it's going to be very dangerous. Sometimes people think, is this like some escape hatch for rich people? I'm like, no, it will be dangerous, hard work. It's going to be, you're out there on the frontier. There are far more ways to die there than there are on Earth. And a tremendous amount of hard work. But it will be, I think, fun and a great adventure. But it will not be a luxurious thing, that is for sure.
This guy has to be an alien. So it's like, it's going to be fun,
But we're going to build the propellant
Like
plants.
he's
We're going to
done it already.
Get the solar power going, get the the food production.
It's gonna be hard work.
Start creating the necessities. Iron.
So you have to be a space engineer. It's gonna be hard work.
All of the sort of fundamentals of industry in order to make sure that Mars is a self-sustaining planet. Over time, this would take a while, but you can terraform the planet and make it Earth-like, mostly by just warming it up. So yeah.
So we're gonna do global warming
to
Mars.
As you talk about this, I mean, honestly, what comes to mind is sort of the idea that a Martian civilization.
The same reason why we're running from Earth.
Imported from Earth, it will quickly evolve to be quite a bit tougher by necessity, and just the mental images leaping in my mind is the Spartans in ancient Greece. Do you think the sort of vector of civilization will unfold differently as a consequence of how difficult it's going to be to get it going?
Yeah, probably will.
Like Clubhouse.
I think so.
So then maybe we don't just have a backup, right? Maybe we actually have an alternative, like and the ability to actually see two fundamentally different civilizations flourish.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that you can only go to Mars every 2 years, and
he's pretty new to
6 months journey. Although I think we can over time get that potentially as low as 1 month. But still, you can't go to Mars when Earth is on the other side of the sun from Mars. Like times where Mars is literally on the other side of the sun. You can't get no matter what you do. So that time gap would mean that there'd be essentially a new group of people arriving roughly every 2 years. I don't know. I think it'd be interesting. People would probably trace their
this fourth trip,
this particular sun, Earth Mars synchronization event. I don't know, but like I said, the important thing is that we've established Mars as a self-sustaining civilization, and that we have done whatever we can to ensure the long-term continuance of consciousness as we know it. Because so as far as we can tell, we're the only the light of consciousness, which is a delicate little candle in the dark. It's only here on Earth. I mean, it might be other places, and there's arguments that it's likely to be other places. But honestly, we have seen no sign of it, and I'm pretty sure that I would have known about it, and I've seen nothing to indicate that there's any alien civilization whatsoever. I'd be the first to jump on that in a second, but I've seen no such evidence.
Elon, that's actually something we wanted to ask you about, because in the last year, there's been multiple reported UFO sightings. There was the mysterious object that flew past our solar system.
Yes, here it is.
I think you just described that you haven't seen any evidence of aliens, but A, do you think we'll ever run into them? And B, if we do, have you heard of dark forest theory from the three-body problem? How do you think we should think about aliens?
I'm trying to be strict in the scientific sense of the word, of saying I've seen not a single piece of conclusive evidence. So that doesn't mean there aren't aliens. I'm just literally saying I've seen nothing that could not be explained by other means, and where the probable explanation by other means is much more likely than is alien technology.
Wiggled his way out.
So, and people are saying there's sightings of aliens. I'm like, listen, man. The resolution of the picture needs to be at least like 7-Eleven ATM good. Okay.
That's a fact, though.
Yeah, the Loch Ness monster bullshit. It's like, come on. Is that like a 500 megapixel camera? What are you talking about? Where do you find that thing? It's gonna be at least like iPhone 6 level or something. I don't know.
Can I ask one more question? That's okay for you. So, Elon, you famously have a pile of really beautiful kids. And I know you care about them a great deal, as all parents do. what would your response be if
white
they start
folks
coming
are
to you when they
so
turn 18 or
fucking
22
sorry
and they
for
say,
my language.
Dad, now that you've landed us on Mars and there's a colony forming, like I really want to go.
What a dad joke.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about, say, the third or fourth set of landings on Mars, then that'd probably be, I'd be okay with that. Although I've called them so far, and none of them say they want to go. So they may change their minds, but currently they're not chomping at the bit to go to Mars.
Okay, so some interesting. Elon, okay. So I think for folks who may not know this, I think we originally met over Twitter, and it is safe to say, and I want to move on from Mars to memes. It is safe to say that you might be the master of the memes, and in fact, you had a quote: "Who controls the memes controls the universe." Could you just explain what you meant by that and how you became this person?
Well, it's a play on words from Dune. Who controls the spice controls the universe. And then if memes are spice, then it's memes. There's a little bit of truth to it in that, like how do you what is it that influences the zeitgeist? Like how do things become interesting to people? And memes like actually kind of a complex form of communication that's that like a picture says 1,000 words and maybe a meme says 10,000 words. It's a complex picture with a bunch of meaning in it, and it can be it's aspirationally funny. So it's I don't know. I love memes. That they
I don't know. The memes are opposite.
Very insightful. And
picture has no words to give
history,
direction. The memes giving you the exact direction.
In general, has powerfully affected people. So, yeah.
How did you get so good at them? I remember following you many years ago. Going from that to your sea shanties meme or any one of the memes, and some of it may not be safe for work here. How did you get?
We are told that. Why do we have to say for work?
You don't have to say for work.
Honestly, I didn't even know Elon Musk was good at memes.
I know. Yeah. I'm not. I guess probably. If you go back to my very early tweets, technically I was on Twitter. I think in the very early days when there were only maybe 10,000, less than 10,000 users. But then people were just tweeting what kind of latte they had at the University Street Starbucks, and I was like, I don't need to know this. So then I deleted my Twitter account, and then a fake person who got my Twitter account had tweeted for a few years, and then my friend Billy said, "Hey, you really should be on Twitter so you can speak directly to people." So I was like, okay, I'll do. My friend Billy convinced me to just regain my Twitter account, and my early tweets are pretty racy, pretty because I was reading this biography of Captain Lagrange, so it's sort of
I'm really looking at other rooms to see if something else is more interesting.
I like how you say that your early tweets were racy and not like now.
The man's going to Mars and he said there's no aliens. So.
Some people think he's gone crazy on Twitter. I'm like, no, I started crazy on Twitter.
Now they're talking about me. Like Drake ain't the greatest man to do memes out here.
What are the new things that you're following now with respect to memes or creating?
Sorry, what was that again?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, what are the new memes that you're following or creating right now? What are the ones that are interesting to you
I'm gonna
right
go
now?
take a smoke break. You guys can listen to this meme.
I don't really follow memes.
You just make them.
I make some of them, and then some of them are sent to me. I have some pretty
What's wrong with
meme
adults?
dealers.
Yeah.
We all make and repost memes. This is oh my gosh. 40-year-old plus people on the internet are weird.
You gotta have a good meme dealer. Claire as well, and Jake now, and quite a few others actually. I unfortunately am the lucky recipient of very interesting memes.
Great. Today we're slightly changing subjects a bit. Just on Twitter, today you posted about Neuralink and why people should be working there. For folks who don't know about it, I thought it was really cool. Just the possibility of it is just really fantastic. Tell us more about it. There are a lot of engineers listening on this Clubhouse. What is Neuralink? Why should we care? What is possible with it?
Sure. So, the long term. Okay, so Neuralink stems from a concern I had, where I was trying to figure out, even in a benign AI scenario, how do we at least go along for the ride? So, if for those that are following AI closely, it's obviously improving dramatically. If you see, look, say GPT-1 versus GPT-2 versus GPT-3, and just how radically that's improved. And just as deep minds, and I think they've run out of games to win at, basically. And there's just, and look, I feel like Tesla, I think an important thing I've noticed is Tesla actually has, I think, one of the strongest AI teams in the world, but it's AI team focused on real world usability. So just really solving vision, perception, and control with AI. But even in a benign scenario for AI, where let's say the AI is just really wants to be super nice to us and make us happy, how do we stay relevant and still have meaning and at least go along for the ride? That's in the good scenario. And then in terms of avoiding the bad scenario, to the degree we can couple collective human will to the outcome of artificial intelligence and what's developed in that way, I think that'll probably be a better scenario than if we're unable to effectively couple collective human will to that outcome. So the final... Now, sorry, this is getting kind of esoteric, but...
Oh, we love it, keep going.
Okay, so people are already assignable in that you already have a tertiary digital layer. You've got your sort of limbic system, which is your primitive drives and desires and responses, and then you've got your cortex, which is long-term planning and thinking. Those are two biological layers, and then there's a tertiary layer, a third layer, which is digital, and you already have that in the form of your phones and computers and all your applications. You're far more powerful than a human would be without those cognitive enhancements. But the bandwidth between your cortex and your digital tertiary layer is very slow. And in fact, with the advent of phones, it got even slower. So if you're thumbing, say, what's the bit rate of a pair of thumbs on a phone? It's very low. Let's be super generous and say it's 100 bits per second.
This nigga got my interest.
Computers can communicate at trillions of bits per second. So it's, at a certain point, the computer gets smart enough. It's like the computer's just trying to talk to a tree. Trees do sort of talk, but they talk so slow that we don't notice. So we need to improve the bandwidth. And with a direct neural interface,
I'm going to go improve my bandwidth. I'll be right back.
Improve the bandwidth between your cortex and your digital tertiary layer by many orders of magnitude. I'd say probably at least 1,000 or maybe 10,000 or more. And we could also spend a lot more time thinking about interesting things as opposed to taking complex thought structures, compressing them down into words, which also, again, a very low bit rate, and then having someone else receive those words, decompress them, and then send words back at you. So a huge amount of our brain power is spent in compression, decompression, and we could be instead sending it on deeper concepts. And so if you had a neural link, if two people had a neural link, you could do conceptual telepathy, where you have a complex series of concepts, and you can just transfer them directly, uncompressed, to the other person. This would massively improve the quality of communication and the speed of it. So, and then, there are other sort of pretty wild things that could be done. Like you could probably save state in the brain, and so if you were to die, your state could be returned either in the form of another human body or a robot body. I mean, this is getting like really, it's weird sci-fi stuff here.
This makes a plot like Altered Carbon. Go on, love it.
Yeah, it's kind of like Altered Carbon. Yeah, exactly. But I think you could decide if you want to be a robot or a person or whatever. And you wouldn't be exactly the same. So there'd be a little lost in transfer. But you can also say it's also arguably true that when you wake up in the morning, you're not exactly the same as yesterday. Or the you of a month ago is not the same as the you of today. A bunch of brain cells have died, and some memories have faded, some have strengthened, there are new memories. So anyway, the point is, like, you wouldn't be there could be something analogous to a video game, like a saved game situation where you are able to resume, upload your last state. Yeah, kind of like Altered Carbon. Maybe lose a few memories, but mostly be you. So now that's the long-term stuff. In the short term, for Neuralink, the idea would really just be to address brain injuries or spinal injuries, and make up for whatever lost capacity somebody has with a chip, with an implanted chip. So the first thing that we're going after is a wireless implanted chip that would enable someone who's a quadriplegic or tetraplegic to control a computer or mouse or their phone or really any device just by thinking. And this obviously would be a massive enabler, make life way easier for them. There have been sort of primitive versions of this device, one done with wires sticking out of your head, but it doesn't work all the time, and you can't take it home with you. So just having, basically, you think, like, in simplistic terms, I'd say it's sort of like a Fitbit in your skull with tiny wires that go to your brain. A Fitbit in your skull with tiny wires. So if somebody who's listening is good at designing, like, Fitbits, Apple Watches, phones, computers of various kinds, then actually they would be a great fit for Neuralink. So, yeah, we'll probably be releasing some new videos showing progress maybe in a month or so, and because we already got like a monkey with a wireless implant in their skull and the tiny wires, who can play video games using his mind, and he's totally normal and happy. So it's not look like an unhappy monkey, and you can't even see where the neural implant was put in, except that he's got like a slight like dark mohawk. But other than that, he's not uncomfortable and he doesn't look weird. So we're and I was like when the USDA person came through and inspected our facilities. Our monkey facilities. She said it was like the nicest monkey facilities she's ever seen in her entire career. Just FYI. We went the extra mile for the monkeys. As long as you didn't make them play Cyberpunk. that would be it. That would be a hell of a trip for a monkey. But one of the things we're trying to figure out is like, can we have the monkeys play mind pong with each other? Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
I have to say the pig demo was really fantastic. That was really cool.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, it's great seeing Neuralink and making good progress. And like I said, I want to be clear. Like, the early applications will really just be for people who've had a serious brain injury, like where it's like the value of the implant is just would be enormous, because obviously the early implants will come with some non-trivial risk, and so it's going to be like, okay, does the good far outweigh the bad, and then that would be a candidate for some of the initial surgeries with full disclosure of like the little risks and everything. And one of the things we're really paying close attention to is the ability to remove the implant. So it's not like where somebody doesn't want it, or if it's not working, we can take it out, and then we can reimplant another one. So we've tested implantation, removal, and reimplantation, and it works great.
Sorry, Mark, just switching topic. Yeah, so switching topics. So Elon, as I mentioned kids earlier, as it turns out, I have a very bright and inquisitive 5-year-old who is crawling all over everything and trying to figure everything out and learning as much as he can, as fast as he can. Like, what, with everything that we know now and kind of all the modern tools we have, like, what's the best way to think about educating a 5-year-old in today's world?
Sorry, the best way to educate a 5-year-old?
Yeah, educate a 5-year-old and then think about kind of his education over the course of the next, 5 or 10 years. Like, what kind of program ideally should you think a kid should be on?
Nigga, raise your kids.
Well, my observation is my kids were mostly educated by YouTube and Reddit, and then and their, I guess, classmates and I guess there were lessons as well, but judging by the amount of time they spent online, it seemed like most of their education is actually coming from online. I think generally with education, you want to make it as interesting and exciting as possible. Like, what are some of the, like, if you feel like what are all the things, like, say, a good video game does to keep someone engaged and interested? If kids can be super engaged in video games, like, it's great for them to be super engaged in education as well. Like, one of the things that's, I think, very fundamental is to explain the why of things. Like, so we're teaching you this, but we're going to explain why we're teaching you this and why it is relevant. I mean, we've evolved to forget things that are irrelevant or have low relevance probability. It makes sense. Like, otherwise we remember all sorts of nonsense things that weren't very important to our future. So unless relevance is established clearly, then people will have a hard time remembering it by its nature, because it appears to be irrelevant. It might be relevant, but if it's not explained to them, they won't know. And then if you want to have some sort of if you're trying to say problem solving, some sort of engaging narrative for the problem solving, like it's like far better to say, okay, we're going to teach you how an engine works by taking apart an engine and then putting it back together, and then let's find out what tools are needed in order to take this engine apart, put it back together. It's like, okay, we need screwdrivers, wrenches, and Allen keys, and we need a winch, and a bunch of other things. And then you understand the relevance, and it's much more of an interesting problem. This is much better than having, say, a course on wrenches or a course on screwdrivers. You just, like, start with a problem and say, what tools I need to solve this problem. That establishes relevance and gives a compelling narrative thread.
Yeah, it seems like if you had sort of elaborate enough projects, you could roll a huge number of topics into that ultimately kind of combine into a single project with some really actually interesting form of output. For example, building a vehicle or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
If you have a narrative thread, like, why is it all established relevance, and there's a story to it, and you say, like, well, you can't turn that bulb without the wrench, and then, like, let's see, how can we make this engine better? What do we need to do? Okay, well, let's calculate if it's a gasoline engine, how do you get to a higher RPM or better compression ratio? I'm using, like, outdated analogy engines, but you can say for an electric motor, what steps would you take to get higher torque, and pull higher power out of this electric motor? And then you can explain. It's obvious why things like Maxwell's equations become necessary in that situation. Yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. Elon, you would not believe the number of parents and people with kids who have asked us about tonight, and I think there are two questions that are connected. One is, how do kids, if you're having a kid and you want teacher to become a polymath like you have become, what advice you have for parents? And the next one is, here you are with, so many companies that you've created that I can't even list them on the top of my head. Why doesn't the world have, and this doesn't mean to sound, psychopathic, but why doesn't the world have more Elon Musks?
On his dick much?
Well, I don't know. I might be getting too much credit here.
Thanks,
so,
Elon.
I mean, for me, these things I've done have been because I felt a strong compulsion to do it. So it's not like nobody was pushing me to do it, but it was just like I felt a strong compulsion to do them. I mean, I wouldn't say, there were pretty long sections of my life that have been very painful and difficult, and I'm not sure people would want to do that, There's
long suffering.
If somebody wants to be me or do the things I've done, I would say most probably you're mistaken. You do not want to do that. You'd have to have some kind of like rape demon in your skull that you just got to get it done. It's like when people ask me like, what encouraging words do you have for entrepreneurs who want to do a startup? And my response is, if you need encouraging words, don't do a startup. My friend Lily, doing a startup was like getting glass and staring into the abyss for a long time.
Yep. Okay. We're going to switch topics like in this, but I think for everyone in the audience who just caught up and you managed to squeeze in, just a quick reset/recap. This is the one and only Elon Musk for his first time on Clubhouse, and this is a show that we do every single day. I know a lot of you are trying to get in the room. There are a bunch of old people who see if we can get there.
So I don't feel so
having an amazing conversation with Elon. Elon, okay. This is something you joked about, but I'm kind of curious to get your, maybe serious answer to this, which is all things cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. You famously just changed your Twitter bio to just the Bitcoin logo and the word Bitcoin this week. What do you think of cryptocurrency? What do you think of Bitcoin? What do you think of other cryptocurrencies? We'd love to get your take on the entire thing.
Well, I gotta watch what I say here because some of these things can really move the market. So, first of all, I should say, like, many friends of mine have tried to convince me to get involved in Bitcoin for a long time, like from where it first just popped, it popped out there. My friend, my bully, he actually had Bitcoin cake, a cake that was like had a big sort of Bitcoin symbol on it, and he fed me a slice of Bitcoin cake in 2013. So, I mean, clearly, I should have at least bought some Bitcoin 8 years ago. Like, what more do people need to do? Like, Jesus. Talk about being late to the party. So I was a little slow on the uptake there. My apologies. But I think about it a fair bit, but I do at this point think Bitcoin is a good thing. So
wow,
I am a supporter of Bitcoin.
Go up 50
well, like I said, I'm late to the party, but I'm a supporter of Bitcoin. And I think Bitcoin is really on the verge of getting broad acceptance by sort of the conventional finance people, So, I think so. I don't have a strong opinion on other cryptocurrencies. I mean, occasionally I make jokes about Dogecoin, but they are really just meant to be jokes. But Dogecoin was made as a joke to make fun of cryptocurrencies, obviously. But fate loves irony, and often, as per my said, the most ironic outcome is most likely, or as I say, the most entertaining outcome is often most likely, and arguably the most entertaining outcome and the most ironic outcome would be that Dogecoin becomes the currency of Earth in the future.
Oh my God. Elon, when you tweeted me this afternoon, I will say my tweet replies have been overwhelmed by probably like a zillion different like cryptocurrency coins. But yeah, and by the way, you might remember the infamous time when your replies were filled with cryptocurrency bots on Twitter. Oh my god, it was insane. Yeah. That's actually how Elon and I actually wanted meeting, because that was a very painful time. Okay. Yeah. In fact, and then I made a joke about Bitcoin, and my account got locked. Yeah. I had to actually try and convince some folks that was actually the real Elon Musk. And get his account unblocked. Yeah. Okay. So I want to the biggest bring us back to one of your companies. We actually have a Tesla Model S sitting outside our house right now. It carries us and our 2-year-old baby around, and we love it. Would love to just get your take on, where you see, you just have a refresh of the Model S coming out. I saw the review for it. Where you just see, the future for Tesla, and especially when it comes to all things battery technology and self-driving. Those two topics I think a lot of people are very interested in. Okay, so you're asking about the future of batteries and self-driving? More like actually, where do you see Tesla over the next few years?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that, the goal with Tesla is to, and has been from the beginning, is to accelerate the advent of sustainable energy. So in order to do that, we've got to make a lot of cars. We've got to make them increasingly affordable. And our rough target is we want to be able to eventually make 20 million cars a year. The reason for that is the 2 billion active cars and trucks on the road, and figure you're not really moving the needle unless you're changing 1% of the existing fleet. And so that's sort of roughly how we came up with 20 million cars and trucks per year. That's very important to accelerate the advent of sustainable energy. And then, of course, we've got stationary battery packs and solar, which was make a lot of progress in that front. So yeah, we're going to try to grow car production as fast as possible, and that the primary limiting factor there is battery cell production. So we're getting as much as possible from suppliers, and then but even that is not enough. So we're actually going to be building battery cells ourselves. But it's important to emphasize that to our suppliers who are great, we've got great suppliers, that we're not trying to put them out of business. We want them to increase their rate as well. So Panasonic, LG, and CATL, and then to add, to increase to accelerate sustainable energy further, we're making our own cells, and I'm pretty excited about that. And then, so I think you expect, possibly an acceleration of compounding annual growth. Well, at least aspirationally, that's our goal. And then combine that with autonomy, and it's a very powerful story, because once you have autonomy of self-driving cars, you massively increase the utility of any given car. A typical car is driven about 12 hours a week. You think like, maybe depending on the situation where you live, it's like maybe an hour and a half a day or something like that. Or in LA, it might be 2 hours a day. So roughly 12 hours a week. And there's 168 hours in a week, in a 7-day week. So most likely cars that are autonomous could maybe do a third of the hours in the week or something like that. So maybe they do, 60 hours a week of usage instead of 12. So you got basically a 5x increase in asset utilization there, and far less need for parking lots, parking garages, and that kind of thing. So, but this in itself is good for the environment, because you need fewer cars to get the same thing done. And we need fewer parking garages and places just to keep cars when they're not in use, because they're just being in use a lot more. So, but the net of like having a lot of cars times automation or times self-driving, I think is at the heart of why a lot of investors think Tesla is worth what it is. They're giving us a lot of credit for future execution, but I think the trend is there. It's quite positive. And I'd like to once again say, if anyone is interested in practical AI, AI that where the rubber hits the road, please join Tesla's autopilot/AI team. I think people don't quite appreciate that Tesla has some of the most advanced AI in the world, both on the software side and on the hardware side. And on the software, on the hardware side, we've obviously got our inference computer, which I think is still the best inference computer out there, even though it's been going for a couple of years. And then we're building Dojo, which will be the most powerful training computer, because it's going to process vast amounts of video training data. Bringing the day of self-driving sooner translates directly to lives saved and injuries avoided. Because about 1 million people die every year in car accidents, and about 10 million per year have serious injuries. So that's the sooner the better, and a lot of lives will be saved and people's lives made better if it happens sooner.
Elon, on self-driving, you made headlines, I think, a while back when you basically, to put it mildly, criticized LiDAR as a key technology for self-driving. Could you talk more about that and why, you're not such a huge fan of LiDAR?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm just talking smack,
No, we didn't know that.
Yep, it's time you knew.
We took those quite seriously.
I confess. First of all, I'm not like fundamentally against LiDAR on all things, because for the SpaceX Dragon that docks with the space station, we actually developed and built our own LiDAR for docking with the space station. So obviously, if I hated LiDAR, we would not have done that. And this is well before. This is like 10 years ago we started doing that. So I don't have some sort of weird antagonism to LiDAR. However, for driving on real world roads, you have to solve vision. You have to solve vision, basically understanding objects with passive optical.